A blinding light pierced through the steel bars, blurring everything in front of me. I shut my eyes tightly, trying to push away the sharp pain in my head. As I sat up, a wave of dizziness hit me like a storm, dragging along an unbearable nausea. I turned my head, searching for the trash can I usually kept beside my bed, only to find cold walls and faded green bars instead. The icy sensation of the concrete floor beneath my feet jolted me awake. I realized I wasn't in my familiar room anymore. Instead, I was lying on a rusty metal bed, locked inside a small cell, isolated from the outside world. A police officer sat outside, his cold gaze fixed on his phone screen, completely ignoring my presence. "What happened?" I muttered, trying to piece together fragmented memories in my mind. But everything was just a foggy blur, disjointed images from the night before flashing back, laughter, cocktails, and an argument. The officer, Jenkins, stood up, his piercing eyes showing no sympathy. "You don't remember anything, huh? Let me remind you. You got drunk, fought with your buddy, and got kicked out of the bar. Then, you drove and almost killed a family of 4. Do you even realize what you've done?" My heart felt like it was being crushed. Jenkins' words sliced through me like sharp knives. I couldn't believe I had done that. "But I don't remember anything. This must be a mistake, right?" I tried to protest, but my trembling voice only fueled Jenkins' disdain. "There's no mistake here, kid. You put yourself in this mess. Now you've got 2 options. Pay 10, 0, or face jail time. Make your choice." The air in the cell grew heavier, suffocating me with an invisible weight. Jenkins stood before me, his cold eyes staring as if he were deciding my fate. "You don't seem like someone who can pay 10-0, he said, his voice slow and haunting. I looked at him, the feeling of helplessness consuming me. "I don't have the money. I don't know what to do," I stammered, my voice trembling. Jenkins smirked, a smile devoid of humanity. "Then I have another option for you. A way to earn that money, without going to jail." I looked up, my eyes filled with doubt. "What option?" "The Cromwell mansion," he said, each word dripping with an ominous tone. "You just have to survive one night inside. If you do, I'll pay you 10-0, enough to fix your problems." The Cromwell mansion. The name rang in my mind like a warning bell. I'd heard of the place through the ghost stories whispered around town. An abandoned estate, said to be haunted by cursed spirits that still roamed its halls. "You're joking, right?" I asked, trying to mask the unease in my voice. Jenkins didn't answer immediately. He simply stared at me, his piercing gaze cutting through my thoughts. "You can choose jail, but if you want a second chance, the Cromwell mansion is your only option." I felt cornered, trapped in a decision with no escape. Jail or the Cromwell mansion? Both sounded like nightmares I couldn't wake up from. But I had no other choice. I needed the money to salvage my life. "Fine," I said, my voice weak but determined. "I'll do it." Jenkins smiled, a grin that froze my blood. "Good. I'll take you there tonight. But remember, there are no rules except survival, and don't expect any help." The police car rolled down the narrow road, flanked by rows of dead trees, their barren branches resembling skeletal hands clawing at the sky. The cold air enveloped everything, and the wind howled through the windows, carrying whispers that seemed to echo in my ears. Jenkins sat in the front, his silence unnerving. "The Cromwell mansion isn't far now," he said, his deep voice breaking the eerie stillness. I didn't respond, my eyes fixed on the window as the darkness swallowed everything outside. As the car turned onto a gravel path, the gates of the Cromwell mansion came into view under the headlights. The towering iron gates, covered in withered vines, stood like a giant guarding its sinister secrets. Jenkins stopped the car, stepped out, and approached the control panel beside the gate. He entered a code, his fingers moving deliberately over the keypad. I heard him whisper a single word. promiscuity. The gates groaned, then slowly swung open with a screech that sent chills down my spine, as if they were reluctant to let anyone through. "Get out," Jenkins ordered, his gaze unwavering. I stepped out, the icy air biting at my skin as I took in the full view of the Cromwell mansion. The mansion was grand, but not in a comforting way. Its black stone walls gleamed ominously, its tall windows stained with deep crimson glass, and its roof adorned with grotesque sculptures that looked like monsters frozen mid-roar. The light from the chandeliers inside spilled out through the windows, casting shifting shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. "This is where you'll spend the night," Jenkins said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Remember, there are no rules except survival. If you want the money, you have to make it through." I swallowed hard, the unease growing within me. Do I really have to go inside? Jenkins simply smiled, a cold, lifeless grin. "You don't have any other choice." I looked at him, then back at the mansion. It felt as though everything around me was conspiring against me, as if I had stepped into a realm that didn't belong to this world. As I stepped through the threshold of the Cromwell mansion, the cold air inside felt heavier, as if the house itself was trying to push me back out. The doors shut behind me with a deep thud, sounding more like a warning than a welcome. Suddenly, a soft giggle echoed from the shadows. I froze, spinning around to look, but saw nothing. The giggle came again, closer this time, sharper. A childlike yet eerie voice broke the silence. "Welcome to the Cromwell mansion, reluctant traveler." From the corner of the room, a small figure emerged. It was a little girl, no older than 10, wearing a tattered white dress, her long black hair concealing most of her face. Her eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, like two tiny flames flickering in the night. "I'm Jezebel," she said, her voice both innocent and haunting. "I'll help you, if you listen to me." I stood frozen, fear gripping every inch of me. "Help me? Help me do what?" Jezebel smiled, a grin that sent shivers down my spine. "Help you survive, of course, but you must follow the rules. If you don't, you'll never leave this place." She handed me a worn piece of paper, covered in strange, handwritten rules. "Stay away from creatures with red eyes. If they see you, run. Do not eat any food containing clementine. It's not meant for the living. Do not sleep for more than 5 minutes. If you do, you'll never wake up." I stared at her, the unease growing inside me. What are these creatures? And why can't I sleep longer? Jezebel tilted her head, her glowing eyes burning brighter. "The creatures here aren't like you. They're not human, but they love playing with humans. As for sleep, here, sleep is a trap." My heart pounded, each word from Jezebel cutting deeper into my mind. How am I supposed to survive the night with rules like these? She stepped closer, her smile never wavering. "You don't need to know how. You just need to follow the rules. And remember, if you break any of them, I won't help you anymore." Hunger began to gnaw at me as the clock struck midnight. The air inside the Cromwell mansion grew colder, more isolating, and terrifying. I decided to search for food, though Jezebel's rules still haunted me. The kitchen was at the end of a long hallway, its dim lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. I stepped inside and immediately felt something was wrong. The kitchen was unlike any I had ever seen. Copper pots and pans hung suspended as if floating, and the black stone countertops reflected light in a sinister way. "Well, a guest," a deep, mocking voice boomed. I froze, turning around to see a tall man standing in the center of the kitchen. He wore a white apron, but his glowing red eyes told me he wasn't human. "Lucius," he introduced himself, a smirk revealing sharp teeth. "Jezebel's older brother. I hear you're trying to survive the night. How amusing." I took a step back, the sense of danger surrounding me. "I'm just looking for some food," I said, my voice trembling. Lucius laughed, his laughter echoing through the kitchen. "Food? Of course I have something for you." He pulled out a small orange pastry and placed it on the counter. Clementine cake. Would you like to try it? I froze. Clementine. The name appeared in Jezebel's rules. I stared at the cake, fear overtaking me. No, I can't eat that. Lucius tilted his head, his glowing red eyes intensifying. Oh, you know the rules already? How delightful. But do you know that rules aren't always right? Are you sure avoiding Clementine will help you survive? He stepped closer, his smile growing more sinister. You know, I like guests like you. I love cooking, but human meat is still the finest ingredient. Would you like to try being one? I backed away, the air in the kitchen feeling like it was closing in on me. I don't want any trouble. I just want to leave. Lucius sneered, then suddenly reached out, pulling me closer. You can't leave so easily. Here, everyone pays a price. And I think you'll be the main course for tonight's feast. A roar echoed deep within the mansion, reverberating through the walls and shaking the very air around me. I froze, the cold and isolation growing heavier with each passing second. This wasn't a sound made by humans or any animal I knew. It was raw, ferocious, and commanding. Yeti, Jezebel's voice whispered in my mind, like a warning. I remembered the rules. Stay away from creatures with red eyes. But Yeti wasn't just a creature with red eyes. It was a supernatural entity, dangerous and powerful, rumored to be impossible to escape. I turned toward the hallway, where dim light was swallowed by a massive shadow. Each step of the Yeti shook the ground, and I could feel the icy chill radiating from its body, freezing the air around it. There was no time to think. I turned and ran. The Yeti's roar came again, closer, louder, filled with fury. I could hear its claws scraping against the floor, chasing me with relentless speed. The staircase appeared ahead, the only path to safety. I climbed, each step heavier as if gravity itself was pulling me back. But the Yeti didn't relent. It leaped, its sharp claws narrowly missing my legs. I glanced back. Its glowing red eyes burned in the darkness, filled with rage and hunger. It roared again, the sound shaking every fiber of my being. At the top of the stairs, I saw a door. I didn't know where it led, but it was my only hope. I sprinted toward it, yanked it open, and slammed it shut just as the Yeti was about to reach me. The space beyond the door was completely different. Silent, dark, but at least I was away from the Yeti. I collapsed onto the floor, my breaths shallow and rapid, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. But I knew this was only part of the ordeal. The Yeti might have been left behind, but the Cromwell mansion held more, many more supernatural entities waiting for me. I stepped into a small room, dim light from an oil lamp casting shadows on the worn walls. The cold air hung heavily, bringing a sense of gloom and isolation. In the corner of the room, a young woman sat on a wooden chair, her empty eyes staring into the void. You're new, aren't you? Her voice broke the silence, gentle yet filled with sorrow. I nodded, tension rising as I realized this girl was unlike anyone I'd encountered. She wasn't a supernatural entity, yet her presence carried a different kind of fear. The fear of failure and despair. I'm Dahlia, she said, her eyes heavy with sadness. I've been here 6 years. 6 years. The number sent chills down my spine. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. I was part of this challenge too, Dahlia continued, her voice like a haunting whisper. I thought I could make it, but I was wrong. I made mistakes, and now I'm trapped here forever. She recounted her story, each word cutting deep into my mind. Dahlia had once been full of hope, but the mysterious rules, the supernatural entities, and the relentless fear had broken her. She couldn't escape the mansion, and now she was only a shadow of herself, a soul trapped in eternal suffering. You can survive, Dahlia said, her eyes lighting up slightly. But if you do, I have a message to send. I looked at her, feeling both pity and fear. What message? My brother, she said, her voice trembling. If you survive, tell my brother I love him. I did everything for him, but I failed. Tell him I'm sorry. I nodded, unsure if I could fulfill this promise. But looking into Dahlia's sorrowful eyes, I knew I couldn't refuse. Thank you, she said, a single tear rolling down her cheek. And be careful, this mansion never forgives mistakes. The room suddenly grew colder, the air feeling drained, making it hard to breathe. A strange darkness began spreading from the corner, as if it were devouring all light around it. Dahlia stood up, her eyes filled with fear, but also determination. The void has come, she whispered, her voice trembling yet firm. I stared at the growing darkness. Void, a supernatural entity I had never seen before, but its presence radiated an overwhelming sense of danger. It had no definite shape, just a deep abyss, a living nightmare ready to consume anything in its path. You have to leave now, Dahlia said, pulling me toward the door. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. No! You have to come with me, I shouted, trying to grab her hand. But Dahlia shook her head, a sad smile appearing on her face. I can't. This is your only chance to escape. The void won't stop. If I stay, I can hold it off long enough for you to get away. Her words hit me like a hammer to the heart. I didn't want to leave her behind, but I knew it was true. The void was closing in, and there was no time to hesitate. Dahlia stepped toward the darkness, her shoulders trembling but her steps resolute. Survive, she said, her voice like a prayer. Deliver my message to my brother. I couldn't say anything, only stood there, helplessly watching her walk into the darkness. The void began consuming her, her screams of agony echoing through the room, as if the very fabric of space was tearing apart. I turned and ran, tears streaming down my face, guilt and sorrow weighing heavily on me. Dahlia's screams still echoed in my mind, but I couldn't stop. She had sacrificed herself so I could live, and I couldn't let her sacrifice be in vain. As I sprinted down the long hallway, the shadow of the void still chasing me, I knew I had escaped, thanks to Dahlia. I descended the stairs leading to the basement, each step echoing a cold, hollow sound, as if the ancient walls themselves were whispering. The air down here was different, thick, icy, and carrying a metallic stench. A sense of isolation enveloped me, sending shivers down my spine. As the basement door creaked open, I was greeted by a scene both horrifying and surreal. Large metal cages lined the room, each housing creatures I had only heard of in terrifying tales. A banshee, with long white hair and glowing red eyes, screamed silently, her anguish palpable. A gaunt wendigo, with hollow black eyes, stared at me, as if waiting for the chance to tear me apart. And children with pitch-black eyes sat motionless, their presence eerie, as if hundreds of unseen eyes were watching me. I tried to steady my breath, but my heart pounded violently in my chest. This wasn't just a basement, it was a prison for supernatural entities, beings that didn't belong to this world. You're here to find Cromwell, aren't you? A voice rang out from the far end of the room. I turned and saw a strange creature trapped in the largest cage. He introduced himself as Amaru. Half human, half snake, Amaru had glowing golden eyes that burned like small flames, and his voice carried an aura of authority and danger. Release me, Amaru said, his voice deep and commanding. I know how you can find Cromwell, but only if I am free. I hesitated. The mysterious rules of the Cromwell mansion had already caused so much suffering, and freeing Amaru could lead to unimaginable consequences, but I knew I had no other choice. If I wanted to survive and uncover the truth, I had to take the risk. I unlocked the cage. As the doors swung open, Amaru began to transform. He was no longer a half-human, half-snake creature, but a massive serpent with gleaming black scales and blazing golden eyes. His presence shook the entire basement, and I could feel the immense power radiating from him. Good, Amaru said, his voice booming like thunder. Follow me. Cromwell awaits. I stood there, both terrified and curious, unsure if I had made the right decision, but now there was no turning back. The door to Cromwell's office creaked open, the sound echoing like a scream in the silence. Inside, the air was so cold that every breath felt like it was freezing in my lungs. The room was vast yet barren, with only an old wooden desk at its center and a large armchair behind it. The dim light from the chandelier cast long shadows, making the space feel even more ominous. Seated in the chair was Cromwell, a supernatural entity beyond comprehension. He wasn't entirely human, nor entirely demonic. His eyes were two dark voids, consuming all light, and his smile, half mocking, half enigmatic, made me feel as though my very thoughts were being unraveled. "So, you finally arrived," Cromwell said, his voice deep and resonant, as if it came from a distant realm. I stood frozen, unable to speak. His presence made me feel small and powerless, like prey before a predator. "I've been watching your trials," Cromwell continued, his long, sharp fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "You've survived, a feat not many can claim. You've proven yourself worthy." I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or terrified. The challenges I had faced, Dahlia's sacrifice, Amara's release, and the strange creatures in the basement had all led to this moment. Cromwell raised his hand, and an envelope materialized in the air, hovering before me. "This is your reward," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Take it and leave. Your task is complete." I reached out and took the envelope, my hands trembling. Inside was a large sum of money, but its value seemed insignificant compared to what I'd endured. "But remember," Cromwell said, his voice suddenly sharp and chilling, "you've entered my world, and you'll never truly escape it. I will always be watching you." His words felt like a curse, leaving me with the sense that I was still trapped, even as I prepared to leave. I turned and walked out of the office, the cold and isolation lingering in my bones. The Cromwell mansion wasn't just a place, it was now a part of me, a part I would never forget. The antique clock Jezebel had lent me was a peculiar item, heavy with mystery and foreboding. It wasn't just an ordinary object. Every intricate detail on its face seemed to hold secrets of time and space. But in a moment of carelessness, I dropped it. The sound of the clock shattering echoed through the quiet room like a death knell. Its fragments emitted a strange, cold light, haunting and otherworldly. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, realizing I had made an irreversible mistake. The atmosphere in the room shifted abruptly. It became cold, isolated, and oppressive, as though I was being pulled into another realm. From the shadows, Jezebel appeared. She didn't walk in like a normal person. She materialized like a specter, her glowing eyes filled with fury. "You've broken it," Jezebel said, her voice a powerful whisper that reverberated throughout the room. I stepped back, fear washing over me. Jezebel no longer carried her usual regal demeanor. Now, she was the embodiment of danger and supernatural might. "You know the rules, don't you?" she continued, her smirk sending chills down my spine. "No one damages my belongings without paying the price." She presented two choices, her voice cutting through my mind like a blade. "Die immediately, or serve me for 7 years after your death." I stood there, feeling as though time had stopped. Either choice led to ruin, but I knew I couldn't defy Jezebel. She wasn't human. She was a supernatural entity with power, far beyond my comprehension. I'll choose to serve," I said, my voice trembling. Jezebel smiled, but there was no forgiveness in that smile. "Good. You understand what awaits you. Remember, after death, you are mine." She vanished, leaving me alone in the cold, oppressive room, with the realization that I had just signed a contract with the devil. The air outside the Cromwell mansion was cold and foreboding, as if the darkness from that place clung to me even after I had left. I held the envelope tightly in my hand, its weight not just from the money inside, but from the burden of all I had endured. I kept my promise to Dahlia. As soon as I left the mansion, I handed the money to Jenkins, the only companion who survived the trials. Then, I wrote a letter to Dahlia's family, recounting her noble sacrifice, but omitting the horrifying details I knew they shouldn't hear. The letter was sent, but the guilt lingered, a shadow that refused to leave me. Time passed, but the memories of the Cromwell mansion never faded. Dreams of Dahlia, Jezebel, and Cromwell haunted me, ensuring I would never truly escape that world. 5 years later, a sudden phone call shattered my fragile peace. My sister, the only family I had left, had gone missing. The police found no trace of her, but I knew where she had gone. The Cromwell mansion. I returned to the place I'd sworn never to set foot in again. The air around the mansion was still cold and isolating, as though time here had stood still. The massive doors loomed before me, a deadly invitation. I stood at the threshold, fear and determination mingling within me. I knew I would have to face Cromwell again, and this time, I wasn't fighting for myself. I was fighting to save my sister. The doors creaked open, and the darkness inside swallowed me whole. I stepped forward, knowing there was no turning back.